Elongated skulls. Sensationalized in the media, they've been in the news a lot in recent years. Can we get to the truth, or at least the reality of them? That's never as easy as it sounds in our human dimension. With patience, we can establish the facts. The first is they've been found worldwide. The second is they go back as far as the Paleolithic era. The third is human beings did engage in artificial head deformation. It was prevalent in parts of Europe 2,000 years ago. The fourth is there are also natural elongated skulls. This is where the rub is with academia. The skull here was recently studied by scientists in Korea. They determined it was not the result of head binding. Head binding leaves telltale signs. The skull tapers toward the back and it looks very much narrow. It doesn't have the fullness and volume of these. You can readily see it here by comparing the lower left to the other ones. Head binding changes the shape, but it doesn't increase the volume. Side-by-side comparisons have been made between the Paracas skulls and modern humans. The former had a volume 25 to 50% larger than the latter. I worked with Brian Foster in the latter part of his study of the skull. I had analyzed the ABO blood group studies quite a long time before. I brought them to his attention and he studied them. I found them anomalous, but not outside the human domain. I traced them back to the area of the Denisovian, part of the Kurgan pig burial culture, and of course had no relationship to the native Peruvian. This is not something that archaeologists want to hear. They didn't want to hear it 30 years ago when the blood group studies revealed that. Much better to have the headlines read, "Ancient Alien Skulls Found," than DNA shows red-haired Paracas long-headed skulls have no relationship genetically to native Peru. They thought they buried that anomaly long ago. I mean, I had to laugh at the media hype that's going on around them. We find references in the archaeological record to elongated heads here in Mexico and many other cultures. Long been a source of consternation for historians and archaeologists. Could a royal artist or sculptor have the right and the license to render the members of the royal family as he chose? Catch up with Brian as he's in the middle of a tour at Mexico City Museum.
You can see that these are clearly cradle boarded, or examples of cranial deformation. Nothing profound in terms of size of the skull or even the shape. Formation or elongated heads.
The Maya are also depicted in their artwork with elongated skulls. As I noted, this is a worldwide phenomenon. You find it in various works of art in many different cultures. Elongated heads are found in Dogon artworks who have a complex account of extraterrestrials coming to the planet and teaching them, and in Egypt and even Samaria. In fact, elongated heads had a role to play in the history of this planet. Our ancestors were part of it, saw them, interact, even copied them. We don't seem to have any collective racial memory of it. That's not as strange as it may sound at first. In fact, Samaria, the source of civilization, was completely forgotten until the middle of the 19th century. Historians and archaeologists are well aware of this whole phenomenon. It's all new to the general public because they don't tell them. This has so bedeviled the historical community, they don't know what to do. They pretend like this is no big deal, we know all about it. It was all artificial deformation done by head binding, blah blah and blah blah blah. That is simply not true. And here's where it's time to out archaeologists and historians. The worn out paradigm they're still invoking when some fetuses were discovered with elongated skulls. This child was under 2. We can see the head is already quite large. It was found in Crimea just a couple of years ago. See, this skull is already elongated, and that child was less than 2 years old. The point was brought out in the 19th century, and the head is quite large. They mentioned 2 infants brought to the museum in Devon and Cornwall, the Natural History Museum, in 1838 and studied. Dr. Bellamy examined them and gave a detailed description. The summarist stated they were very different than average human beings. There are at least 2 mummies which had fetuses with elongated heads, hundreds of children with elongated crania. Don't think that academia is involved in this research. They're not in an unbiased, objective way anyway. As far as they're concerned, the case is closed. But it's not closed. Some scientists in some parts of the world will analyze them, and the public wants to know. So far, the DNA lab tests have been funded independently, and Brian Foster is the one who's been running that show. I have a very serious case to bring against the historical community, archaeologists, curators at museums, that the general public needs to know about. The claim that there are no natural skulls is false. The claim to be objective and unbiased is false. And somehow they managed to lose 6,000 skeletons from an important World Heritage Site under suspicious circumstances. Let's take a look at this case. It all seems to start here. This is where workmen stumbled into the underground temple a century ago. They were stunned by the sophistication. They found the complex had 3 levels, and one of them they found burial chambers. They were shocked to find 7,000 skeletons inside. They found some elongated skulls, but the bodies were sadly decomposed.
That only 10 skulls
Only
could be saved
10
home.
skulls were uncovered. However, one skeleton remained intact, lying on its right side, knees bent. They were put on display at the public museum, but removed in 1985 for unknown reasons. They've since vanished without a trace. They were studied right after they were found. The researchers concluded that they were not identical to modern humans. To recap, that is 7,000 skeletons were found. I don't know exactly how many had elongated skulls. They were put on display at the local museum and removed in 1980. Were found within this structure, the hypogea. The Ancient Alien Show did get the museum to admit they had 6, and they did bring one out, but it didn't really look like those in the original photos. The position that archaeologists have taken on this issue is just untenable. We should remember that the Paracas skulls, after they were found, were simply crated up and forgotten. Paracas culture had people with elongated skulls, natural ones. So too did Malta. The former died out about 800 years ago. The latter, thousands of years ago. Paracas burial sites appear to have been mixed, meaning both types of skulls. I noted that I had studied the avial blood groups of Paracas mummies conducted maybe 30 years ago. Note that the blue stands out. It does, because that's the only place where there's 100% type O blood. Now, here is the anomaly that I mentioned. That was the map of the distribution of type O blood had, but the test I'm referring to showed that the mummies had A, B, and AB. You really don't need those mtDNA tests to determine that they were different. The natives of Peru had only O. Those results went over like a lead balloon in the historical community. This is a map of the distribution of type B, which is in blue this time. I don't want to get too technical here, but we had high AB, which is the rarest blood type. It and AB are thought to have originated in Asia. Considering the red hair and the AB blood, my thought turned to the Russian steppes and the Denisovians. Pit burial cultures came out of that region, and so did the Huns, who carried artificial head deformation into Europe. Now, in purely speculative terms, based upon the evidence, the race with the elongated heads were an elder branch of the human race. They were respected and had positions of authority because they had more knowledge and wisdom. The DNA results I looked at support that. In addition, of interest is when we look for the origins of the Sumerians, we are told the Ubaid preceded the Sumerians. When this tell was excavated in the 1920s, archaeologists were stunned to find lots of these. Why would this kind of image come into these ancient people's minds? Were these beings real or imaginary? Were there many different kinds of hybrids on the planet back then? and some had elongated heads. Culture also produced ordinary artifacts, including seals, but many different types of so-called anthropomorphic figures. Many had elongated heads. But then the bigger shock came when a real elongated head was found at Chogamesh, an Obaid site. This culture flourished from about 6 to 4000 BC. These historical facts put a sharper point on the elongated skull. The notion that people invented cradleboarding doesn't hold up to logic or common sense. Try to imagine a tribal woman explaining to others why she is binding her baby's head. No mothers have ever done it before. I can see the frowns and head. But if many were in positions of authority, yes, there's a compelling motive then to copy. Brian Forster sums it up in this clip.
I am a Paracas person, and I lived on the coast of Peru up until 2,000 years ago. And yes, one of my features is that the elite of my society had elongated heads.
Now note that this is an absolutely dry, barren desert now. Brian goes on to elaborate about the Paracas environment.
And many of you may not know that in this part of Peru on the coast there are ancient pyramidal structures made of adobe, such as this one at Chongos. And this is also where some of the largest elongated skulls in the world have been found, because this was one of the royal cemeteries of the Paracas people.
They died out more than a millennia ago and have not been seen since. But they left a legacy I think we're trying to recover now. They had human-compatible DNA, and they played a role in our history. Just what that was, I aim to find out.